Hi everyone, my name is Aman Sharma, and in this short tutorial, we are going to be seeing or understanding the concept of no parsing. Now, we already do know that for any query, parsing is mandatory, and in that parsing mechanism, hard parsing is even more mandatory because every query has to at least one time go for hard parsing. Only then it can actually execute. Now, after one hard parse, query must execute or at least should execute with soft parsing. But a soft parse basically means that a lookup must be done to find this cursor in the library cache. Now, this may not be acceptable to every user because most of the users, or we can say every user, want his or her code to run as fast as possible. Now, any code or any query, which has to run, that query must be running fast enough. But that is only possible if the access of that cursor from the library cache is done in the shortest possible of time, and the fastest possible way to access a cursor is through the open cursor cache in the session memory of the particular server process. Or in simple terms, uh, the time required to do the lookup for the cursor in the library cache via soft parsing also is something which the users do not really want actually to happen. Now, this is basically the concept that we actually are understanding, or we are going to explain here as no parsing. Now, every open cursor in the open cursor cache is basically going to have a pointer to the shared port's location, or more precisely, within the library cache's hash chains where the cursor's handle is actually placed. To execute this cursor, this pointer is actually used, and since it's a direct hit at the location of the cursor, with the help of this no parsing, we actually can pick up the cursor from that cursor handle location, which means even the soft parsing to execute this cursor is not now needed. Any open cursor is already understood to be parsed, and that's the reason its handle is already available in the shared pool. Now, if a cursor is closed and you are not using PLSQL, then we do actually have to need the parameter session cached cursors to set to a non-zero value. Good thing is, this parameter session cached cursor is already set to the value 50 by default since 10G onwards. This parameter previously was set to value 20, before the versions of 10G. Now, if the parameter session cached cursor is set to a non-zero value, the information of the cursor is moved into the PGA's closed cursor cache. So let's check first of all, do we have the parameter setting available with us or not? So I am right now in my environment. This is my current system, and let's connect to my local database. So now I am in the PDB, though it doesn't really matter. Now in the system, I'm going to check the parameter value for the uh, session cache cursor, and as I said, it is 50 by default. Now, this parameter is basically going to be used when the request for a cursor is going to come. So if a request for a cursor which is actually marked as closed and is in the PGA's closed cursor cache, the hash value lookup for this SQL statement is basically done in the PGA's closed cursor cache. It means the lookup is basically going to done to find a matching hash value for the SQL statement which you are supposedly going to find in the PGA itself. Now, if a match is found, now this cursor is moved to the open cursor cache. Pointer of this cursor handle is used to locate the cursor directly from the cache, and the cursor is actually going to execute without requiring even the soft parsing. But there is a small catch in this particular thing. To make the cursor executed via the soft parsing in the absence of PLSQL, we need to have the parse calls made for the cursor for more than 4 times, and only then it is actually going to be tracked by the help of this no parsing. And if this is the case, in the database we have two statistics which are actually used to basically ensure that how many number of cursors are actually parsed and whether the lookup is happening by soft parsing or by no parsing. So if we do actually check in the system, we have two statistics here. One is the session cache cursor hits and the second one is session cursor cache count. I have mentioned the statistics number of these actually in the system, but I'm using 19C in this video. In the database of yours, which means if you're using an earlier release, maybe 11G or 12C or 18C, the statistics number may not actually be the same. Now here, the count represents the number of statements per session which are actually going to be cached. Now since we are running this in the CDB environment, so this is the total count actually. Of course, we need to check it out for the particular user for which we are actually interested. And the hits basically are that if the lookup of a cursor is actually available through this particular session cached cursor count. So let's try to understand and demonstrate that. And to do this, we are going to create a small table which is basically going to have just two columns for the sake of just making it or keeping it simple. So I'm entering two values here. Of course, the values do not really matter because what we are actually interested in is the execution of this code and then running this code. So let's actually check, select star from gnew, we have the values available. So now we are going to flush the buffer cache and we are going to flush the shared pool to make sure that we are going to start actually at a common slate. And now we are going to run this particular thing and we are going to check basically the information of the statistics. So let's actually check what do we have in this system. So we do notice that in this query, or sorry, in this session, we have the session cursor cache count shown as 49. Mind it, the count is actually on per session basis, and this is the total number of cursors which actually can be cached for a particular query. So now we will run the query on this table, select star from gnew and check the information of this particular cursor. So we can see that one is actually there. Let's run the query again, select star from gnew. Do notice 287x is the count. Says stat and cursor cache 2878, and again let's run the query, select star from gnew and again let's actually run it a couple of times, so 3 times, and now let's actually execute and the set stat, so cursor and cache, so it is now at 2885. Now we can do it by this, or we can even check it for the particular user as well, that what are the statistics available for this user. So if we do it one more time and keeping it simple, for each user I'm actually having the join created, but we can also do it by this. So b $set stat, and we can actually see that we have this particular SID for this user available. Let's check out the SID and username from this session where the username is equal to Aman. It is 1. So we already noted down the count statistics number as 1755 and 1756. So select statistic hash and value from v dollar says stat, where SID equal to 1 and statistic number in 1755 and 1756. Right. Oh, seems like a typo. So let's correct it. So this is the number right now. Let's go ahead and flush the shared pool one more time, and let's also flush the buffer cache one more time, and do check the values. Okay, sorry, name is not there, so select statistic and value from the system and 1756. So currently this is the value. Now let's try to see if we are going to execute the query, do we have any change? And to make it simple, let's connect here as the user Aman at pdb1, and just before we start, we flush the shared pool and buffer cache one more time. So this is just to create a blank slate. Now select start from tnew, and before we do that, let's check the values. This is the value 4950 and 49. Let's come here, execute one time. This is now at 5392 something. The count is not increased. 2 times, 3 times, and now this is the 4th time. And if we are able to track, so we can actually notice that the cursors are actually, or the hits are basically increasing for the particular system. So we can actually see that a count of the hit is now increasing, and it is increasing by 2 basically for each particular hit which is actually coming up. And this basically is the phenomena for the session cached cursor, or the no parsing. Now what if you're going to set the value for the session cached cursor equal to 0? The answer for that is, if you set the session cached cursor equal to 0, you should actually put your queries in the PLSQL, because this capability of caching the cursor handles in the PGA memory is already built in into the PLSQL, which means PLSQL does this for you natively. So the answer is that for standard queries which are running as standalone on your applications or in your SQL Plus environments, the session cache cursor is going to take the control or take the job. And for the PLSQL, it is native capability. The no parsing is basically required to save the additional lookup time. So basically it is an extra optimization which one actually can use, either by setting the parameter to a reasonable number. The ideal number for session cache cursor should be checked by evaluating how many queries you are repeatedly running or giving the parts call for in your work. Obviously, if you're not going to be running too many, then 50 maybe is enough, but otherwise this number should be substantially high. Otherwise, PLSQL, if you're using, that should give you this capability out of the box. Hope this is going to make you understand the concept of no parsing, and this is going to be a useful thing to use for you in the environment of yours. Thank you. My name is Aman, and I'm going to see you in another tutorial very soon.